Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, did either of you have anything to do with the death of your daughter?
No.
No.
My parents are sometimes crying. I'm basically just going on with my life.
I think people are reacting to the fact that you seem to be unbothered by all of this.
I love JonBenét, and she died accidentally.
Your baby's close to you. There's someone out there.
On the morning of December 26, 1996, in Boulder, Colorado, the Ramsey family awoke to a nightmare. 6-year-old JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was reported missing. She was a child beauty pageant contestant and was believed to have passed on Christmas Day. The ordeal began when her mother, Patsy Ramsey, discovered a handwritten ransom note on the back staircase of their home. Terrified, she called 911 around 5:50 a.m., telling police her daughter had been kidnapped. Inside the house at the time were JonBenét's parents, John and Patsy, along with her 9-year-old brother, Burke. But within hours, the case took a darker turn. JonBenét's body was discovered in the family's house, hidden in a basement utility room. Her father found her with duct tape over her mouth and a garrote made from cord around her neck. The cord is essentially what strangled her, and it was also found to be tied around one of her wrists. The cord had been tied around a paintbrush from Patsy's art kit. The brush had been broken into 3 pieces, one for the garrote, another found in the art kit, and the third piece was never recovered. This third missing piece, however, is believed to have been used sexually on her. While no semen was found, there is proof of a vaginal injury. It's widely believed that the strangulation caused by the garrote is what ultimately ended her life, but the situation is more complex. JonBenét was also found to have a severe head injury that caused significant internal bleeding. Medical experts have noted that this head trauma alone would likely have been fatal, but whoever was responsible chose to strangle her afterward, apparently to hasten her death. Doctors estimate that the strangulation occurred anywhere from 45 minutes to up to 2 hours after the initial blow to the head. It's also possible that the strangulation was done to stage the scene, a deliberate attempt to mislead investigators and draw attention away from what really happened. There were also several other unusual pieces of evidence discovered at the scene: a suitcase placed near a broken window, a bowl of pineapple that matched the pineapple found in JonBenét's stomach, blunt instruments, strange body marks, and other key details. These items will become important later, as many of them are closely connected to specific members of the family. But before we dive deep into those, we need to take a closer look at one of the most crucial pieces of evidence: the note left on the stairs. The ransom note left inside the home became one of the most baffling pieces of the case. It was a lengthy 2.5-page handwritten message demanding $118,000 for JonBenét's safe return, an oddly specific figure that happened to match John Ramsey's recent Christmas bonus. Even more disturbing, it was written on a notepad belonging to the Ramseys, using one of their own pens, indicating that the writer stayed inside the house long enough to compose it while the family slept. The message ended with the initials SBTC, a cryptic signature that has never been definitively explained. It is believed, however, that it actually means nothing at all and was meant to serve as a distraction. Now that we've broken down the ransom note itself, the next logical question is, who wrote it? When experts compared handwriting samples, one person stood out more than anyone else's. This leads us into our first key suspect, Patsy Ramsey. From the beginning, many believed JonBenét's parents could have been involved. Investigators pointed back to the ransom note, which handwriting experts argued looked like Patsy's writing style. This could also explain how the ransom note included such a specific amount of money, a detail that only someone within the family was likely to know. The fact that the note was written inside the home also raised suspicion, as did the lack of forced entry. The ransom note also warned that JonBenét would be killed if the police were contacted, which makes the decision to call them immediately seem contradictory and shows no apparent concern for following the threats outlined in the note. The note also has several misspellings and crossed-out words suggesting it was written under pressure. Aside from the ransom note, one of the most scrutinized pieces of evidence tied to Patsy is the 911 call she made the morning JonBenét was reported missing. While she sounds frantic and panicked, investigators have pointed out several unusual details that continue to spark debate.
911 emergency. We need him. Police. What's going on? 515th Street. What's going on there, ma'am? We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please. Explain to me what's going on, okay? There's a note left and our daughter's gone.
One of the most discussed moments happens right at the beginning. She starts by saying, "We need an," which some believe sounds like she was about to ask for an ambulance, suggesting she already knew JonBenét was dead. She then abruptly stops, gasps, and changes it to, "We need police," a shift that has fueled ongoing speculation about what she really knew in that moment. At the end of the call, Patsy believed she had hung up, but she actually hadn't. The line stayed open for roughly 15 more seconds, capturing additional audio after she thought the call was over.
Patsy? Patsy?
You can hear a third voice on the call, one that doesn't sound like Patsy or the 911 operator. It sounds like a child, which would mean it could only be one person, Burke Ramsey. This is important because both John and Patsy repeatedly stated in multiple interviews that Burke was asleep in his room during the entire call, making the voice in the audio a major point of contradiction.
There was a male voice, and I knew that for sure. And then there was another voice. So there were three different voices. The third one was a little bit more faint, but I knew there was a third distinct different voice.
The 911 operator even reported hearing a man's voice in the background, suggesting that John was also present during the call. If true, this could mean that Patsy, John, and Burke were all in the same room, quietly discussing what had happened before the line disconnected. Burke himself denied these claims during his appearance on the Dr. Phil show, which was also his first time speaking publicly about the case.
Your voice was heard saying, "What did you find?" Did you speak those words?
No.
Were you there when that call was made?
No.
So you were not there and you did not speak those words?
That's correct.
It's also been speculated that your father can be heard yelling, "We're not speaking to you."
Definitely don't remember that.
After the 911 call ended, instead of waiting for police to arrive, Patsy began calling friends and family for emotional support and help. This decision has been heavily questioned. By inviting so many people into the home, the scene quickly became chaotic, and it resulted in significant contamination of potential evidence. Once police were finally able to examine the scene closely, they began noticing several troubling details that only raised more questions. Duct tape that had been placed over her mouth had red fibers on them, fibers that matched the sweater Patsy had been wearing. She later explained the reason for this in an interview.
When I laid eyes on her, I knelt down and hugged her. But I had my whole body on her body. My sweater fibers or whatever I had on that morning are going to transfer to her clothing.
One final detail worth mentioning is that a neighbor reported hearing a child screaming on Christmas night, while another claimed they saw a light on in a room of the Ramsey house that was normally kept dark. This raised an unsettling question for many. How could neighbors notice signs of distress, like screaming, yet none of the Ramseys reported hearing anything inside their own home? Even with the suspicious fibers, the handwriting similarities, and the unanswered questions surrounding her actions that morning, there has never been definitive evidence proving that Patsy was responsible for her daughter's death. The doubts raised about her behavior and the ransom note are largely circumstantial, and despite years of speculation, no forensic proof has ever conclusively tied her to the crime. John was also thought to be a suspect as he was the first person to find his daughter dead after police insisted they check the house, almost as if he knew exactly where to look. He also technically disturbed the crime scene when he lifted JonBenét's body and carried her upstairs before investigators arrived, an action that unfortunately compromised crucial forensic evidence. One of the major theories supporting John could have killed JonBenét is that she was potentially sexually assaulted. Although no semen was found, investigators did note injuries in JonBenét's genital area, Evidence also point to the broken paintbrush as a possible tool involved in the assault. According to this theory, John may have assaulted JonBenét and feared she might reveal something, leading to a fatal blow to the head. It's then believed that when he realized she was still alive, he staged the scene to make the death appear to be the work of an intruder, including the use of the garrote. In addition to the theory that John staged the crime scene to look like an intruder attack, investigators also pointed to the broken basement window and the oddly placed suitcase beneath it. John claimed he had broken the window months earlier after locking himself out, but this explanation raised questions. If the window had truly been broken that long, the basement would have been freezing, yet JonBenét and Burke were known to play down there regularly. The suitcase itself had a shoe print on it, later identified as coming from a high-tech brand shoe. Investigators immediately checked all three Ramseys, and none of them owned that type of footwear. At first, this seemed to strongly support the intruder theory. However, there was a major problem. The cobwebs around the broken window were completely untouched. This suggested that if anyone had entered through that window, they would have had to do so without disturbing a single strand, something investigators found highly unlikely. As if that weren't unsettling enough, forensic testing revealed fibers from JonBenét's clothing inside the suitcase, suggesting the possibility that she may have been placed in it at some point during the incident. Moving away from the assault and intruder theories, many people point to an interesting detail on JonBenét's grave. It lists her date of death as Christmas Day. John and Patsy both claimed the last time they saw her alive was around 10 p.m. on Christmas, and her body wasn't discovered until the morning of the 26th. This creates a 2-hour time frame where she could have died on the 25th. Some believe John chose that date because he knew she died on Christmas Day, despite publicly stating he found her on the 26th. One last detail often mentioned is that JonBenét was not the first child John lost under tragic circumstances. Before marrying Patsy, John had been married previously and had 3 children. One of them, his daughter Elizabeth Ramsey, died in a fatal car accident at the age of 22. Some people find it notable that John rarely speaks publicly about her death, interpreting his silence as emotional distance. Others argue that this could simply reflect how he processes grief privately, long before the JonBenét case ever occurred. Despite all of these unusual details, there has never been any concrete evidence that conclusively ties John to his daughter's death. Detectives have never found physical proof linking him to the act itself, and much of the suspicion surrounding him is based on circumstantial clues and inconsistencies rather than hard forensic facts. Another theory centers on JonBenét's older brother, Burke Ramsey. Some speculate that a sibling argument may have accidentally escalated and that their parents might have covered it up to protect him. Investigators also noted a bowl of pineapple on the kitchen table. JonBenét had pineapple in her stomach during the autopsy, indicating she had eaten it only a few hours before her death. On the bowl was found to be Patsy and Burke's fingerprints, and the Ramseys stated they didn't give her pineapple that evening. Next to the bowl was a glass with a tea bag in it, also to have Patsy and Burke's fingerprints. Patsy's fingerprints can be explained as she's the one who washes the dishes. Burke's fingerprint is more questionable. When asked about the bowl, he seems visibly anxious.
At the dining room table.
Can you describe that to me?
Something.
Burke was known to occasionally get into small fights with his sister, and some believe that JonBenét may have taken a piece of his pineapple that night, triggering a sudden outburst. Investigators found a flashlight on the kitchen counter, and some theorize that Burke may have struck JonBenét with it during the argument. Either that or a baseball bat, which was also found at the crime scene. In interviews with Dr. Phil, many viewers noticed that he seemed emotionally detached when talking about what happened to his sister.
Did you hit your sister over the head with a baseball bat or a flashlight?
Absolutely not.
Seems really odd to me. You're 9 years old and your mother comes in the room and says, "Where's my baby? Where's my baby?" And then runs out of the room and you just lay there. And then a police officer comes in your room with a flashlight and you still just stay in bed.
I guess I kind of like to avoid conflict, and I don't know, I guess I just felt safer there.
I think people are reacting to the fact that you seem to be unbothered by all of this.
Yeah, well, I can tell you I was very emotional at the Fernies, and I would just randomly cry out of nowhere. At some point, you have to move on. And
even in interviews conducted just weeks after his sister's death, he appeared emotionally detached. He stated that he had simply been going on with his life, and when asked to draw a family portrait, he included everyone except his sister.
Did you consciously not draw JonBenét?
I don't really remember what was going through my head, but she was gone, so I didn't draw her.
Moving away from the interviews, if we look at this strange mark on JonBenét's body, it could give us additional clues. It was at first thought to be a stun gun, as the distance apart from each mark was similar. However, Burke had a train set that he would often play with. It is speculated, but not proven, that he could have grabbed one of the train tracks and poked his sister with it. One more piece of evidence found at the scene was a dictionary in the house, with the corner of the page pointed at the word incest. This was likely from Burke, as he was the one who likely didn't know what the word meant. This can raise assumptions that maybe he was the one who assaulted his sister and not his father, though none of this has been proven. All of this evidence combined is why he was thought to be the killer. Supporters of this theory speculate that Patsy then wrote the ransom note to cover for him, which they believe explains why parts of it resemble her handwriting, and that John staged the scene by moving JonBenét to the basement and making the injuries appear like the work of an intruder. Taking everything into account, the pineapple, the flashlight, and bat theories, and Burke's calm demeanor in interviews, none of it has ever been supported by physical evidence. The DNA found on JonBenét did not match Burke, and investigators have repeatedly stated that he was never considered a viable suspect. In the end, Burke settled a $750 million defamation lawsuit against CBS in 2019 after a docuseries implied he was responsible for his sister's death. The case was dismissed following a confidential settlement, closing another chapter in a long history of accusations that investigators have repeatedly said were never supported by evidence. Outside of the Ramseys were several suspects, one of the earliest being Bill McReynolds, a local man who visited the Ramsey home just 2 days before JonBenét's death. McReynolds was known for portraying Santa during the holidays, and JonBenét had been especially fond of him. His past added an unsettling layer of coincidence. His own daughter had been kidnapped more than 20 years earlier, and his wife had written a play that involved a child being abused and murdered in a basement. These parallels drew attention from both investigators and the public. McReynolds often talked about feeling a special connection to JonBenét. In an interview with the Denver Post, he said her death affected him more than a major surgery he'd undergone. She had once given him a small vial of glitter, and he cherished it so deeply that he brought it with him into heart surgery. He even told his wife that when he died, he wanted that glitter mixed with his ashes. To some, these gestures felt inappropriate, while others saw them as the emotional reactions of an elderly man who appreciated the kindness of a little girl. Despite the odd details surrounding him, police never found any evidence tying McReynolds to the crime. His DNA didn't match, his alibi was confirmed, and investigators ultimately ruled him out as a suspect in JonBenét Ramsey's murder. Another frequently discussed suspect was Gary Oliva, a convicted offender who lived only a few blocks away from the Ramsey home at the time of the murder. Oliva had a long history of troubling behavior. In 2016, he was arrested on charges involving illegal child material, and years earlier, during an unrelated arrest, police found a photograph of JonBenét in his backpack. When questioned, he claimed he kept the photo because her death deeply touched him and said he wanted to create a memorial tribute for her. Later reports also revealed that Oliva had kept multiple drawings and sketches of JonBenét, something many people found extremely unsettling, and a detail that continues to circulate widely online. His connection to the case deepened when a former high school friend said that Oliva had called him the day after the murder and admitted that he had hurt a little girl in Boulder, Colorado. That same friend also claimed Oliva had once attempted to harm his mother by strangulation using a telephone cord, a detail investigators couldn't ignore given how JonBenét was killed. The biggest piece of evidence, however, was a letter that Oliva sent to the same high school friend. A striking line reads, "Please don't give up on me. I never loved anyone like I did JonBenét, and yet I let her slip and her head bashed in half and I watched her die. It was an accident. Please believe me." On top of this, when arrested in 2016, police found 335 images of JonBenét Ramsey on his phone, including autopsy photos, as well as a poem and photos of shrines to her. For a moment, Oliva seemed like the strongest suspect, but DNA testing eventually ruled him out completely. Investigators found no physical evidence tying him to the crime, and despite the disturbing items he possessed and his long history of alarming behavior, he was ultimately dismissed as a viable suspect. Another man who became a highly publicized suspect was John Mark Carr, an elementary school teacher whose connection to the case began almost a decade after JonBenét's death. Carr inserted himself into the investigation in one of the strangest ways imaginable by directly contacting a journalism professor through email and supposedly confessing to the murder. For several years, Carr exchanged messages with the professor, gradually building trust and sharing disturbing claims about his supposed involvement. In these emails, he used wording similar to the ransom note and even referenced a nickname belonging to Patsy Ramsey's mother, a detail that only the family would know. John Mark Carr claimed he was in love with JonBenét and that he killed her accidentally.
I love JonBenét. Died accidentally.
Are you a man?
No.
What happened? Were you playing with her? What happened?
Her death was an accident.
His emails became increasingly bizarre, filled with descriptions of taking JonBenét from her room, speaking to her in the basement, and expressing twisted sorrow over her death. In August 2006, with help from authorities in multiple countries, Carr was tracked down and arrested in Thailand, where he had fled while facing child exploitation material charges in the U.S. Once in custody, it was clear he wasn't the killer. It was found out that he wasn't even in Boulder, Colorado at the time of the incident. Investigators eventually concluded that he was simply a mentally unstable man obsessed with the case, seeking attention through a false confession. As we close this look into the tragic and mysterious case of JonBenét Ramsey, the questions linger as strongly as ever. The events of December 1996 in Boulder, Colorado continue to captivate and confound, leaving a mix of grief, fascination, and speculation in their wake. The ransom note, the strange timeline, the conflicting statements, and the elusive forensic evidence all combine to create a story that defies easy explanation. Even decades later, the case remains one of the most discussed and analyzed in modern American history. JonBenét's story is more than a crime. It's a reminder of the fragility of innocence and the unpredictability of violence. It shows how even the most ordinary homes can become the setting for unimaginable tragedy. For the public, the media, and amateur investigators, each clue, every small piece of evidence, carries significance, prompting endless theories and debate. In the end, we continue to mourn the loss of JonBenét, an innocent girl who had a whole life ahead of her and was taken too soon.